Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I promise to begin this in a timely way so as to respect everyone's time, and I'm going to do so because at first, at any rate, I have a lot to say about our speakers and about what we're about to do. This is a webinar put on by LegalScout AI, um, which is a tool that I'm not going to talk much about, but you can inquire into at some other time here. But it's right at the heart of the question that we're raising for this webinar concerning the relationship between an attorney and their client and the impact of AI on that relationship. That's really the essence of what we're on about here. I think this webinar is in many ways unique in treating that subject matter because I think that in most other webinars I've been witness to and articles that have come along, um, the concern really goes to the tooling that a lawyer's using, whether it's research or drafting or case management or that sort of thing. These are internal to a lawyer's work and to a law firm's work, and are of great concern really to the public for the most part. Um, but it's my conviction that maybe the most radical or most pervasive change that's about to happen has to do with the influence of AI on an attorney's interface, so to speak, with their own client. And so we have perhaps two of the most qualified people I could find here to speak about this. We've reached out for others, but I decided that given all we have to talk about today, it's probably best to manage this as a two-person presentation with me as nothing more than a facilitator. Let me start with Satish Nori. Satish brings a really unique triple play of experience to the dialogue. He's a housing rights attorney, a clinical professor at NYU Law, and a legal innovation strategist at Just Tech LLC. He has over 2 decades in New York City housing court and has played leading roles as, for example, attorney in charge at the Legal Aid Society in New York. He has a deep understanding of client advocacy and the systemic barriers that people needing justice, wanting justice face. He's an early AI adopter in legal services. He's a co-developer of tools like Roxanne AI, which helps tenants with their repair rights, and he spearheaded AI University to help teach lawyers safe, ethical uses of AI. He's written extensively about this area. Um, for example, a manifesto entitled Actionable Legal Information, exploring how AI can deliver accurate legal guidance without overstepping professional boundaries. Again, exactly on the mark for what it is we're looking to explore today. He's going to help us analyze both the transformative potential of AI and the ethical risks involved. Damien Reel, um, in your screen and my screen to the upper left, is a lawyer, technologist, data scientist, mediator, coder, musician, and VP of solutions at VLEX, who, as if you've been watching the news at all, just is they sold out for a mere $1 billion to Clio software, which is amazing and something that I mentioned to Damien that it might be worth exploring that by itself. But as Damien said, we're not going to sully this conversation with this pretty monumental news. So Damien began his career clerking for federal and state appellate courts. He practiced complex litigation and led digital forensics teams and has coded since the mid 80s as well. So Damien brings this extraordinarily deep and well-rounded experience to the game. He's right now co-directing the Legal Innovation and Technology Lab. He searches through code. He's built tools to experiment with LLMs in legal workflows. And at VLEX, he's integrating LLMs into legal products and advancing the Legal Standards Institute taxonomy. He chairs the Minnesota Bar's Artificial Intelligence and UPL Working Group. So I'm really, really proud and really honored to be able to bring these guys to this topic that we want to explore today concerning the impact of AI on the attorney-client relationship. For my part, just one quick word about me. Who the heck am I? Um, well, I have a long history in law and technology as well, but I go way back, well before these gentlemen, for better or worse. I worked beginning with the US Congress way back when there was an agency, the Congress called the Office of Technology Assessment. And we helped round out some of the early laws related to copyright, especially, and early technology back in the 1980s. It was the advent, really, of the digital revolution in copying devices, storage devices, and the rest, and it set copyright on its tail, and I don't think it's recovered ever since. I worked thereafter at a company called Prodigy and IBM, CBS, and Sears venture that was 10 years before the internet, building a national and eventually international network of users. But as the internet came along, it was rapidly eclipsed. I jumped into a company that went public, related to what's today called a digital agency, and then have since been involved in a variety of different startups, from education-oriented startups to a travel booking company, to one most recently involved in semantic technologies on the web, and went back to the practice of law. And I'm now at a place called General Counsel Online, which is a virtual law firm for businesses. So I also have a background in this stuff, but I'm going to rely on Damien and Satish to really bring me up to speed on what the latest and most pervasive, what monumental technology to appear is going to do to the law. So let's start. And I want to start here. There are really, one can look at the impact of AI on the attorney-client relationship and bifurcate it into really two kinds of inquiries. One concerns, how will this improve the attorney-client relationship? How will it improve the lives of clients? And specifically, I'd like to begin by asking either Satish or Damien to speculate on what might AI do to the question of getting access to justice. Because today, access to justice is really very often a function of how big a check you can write, and how notable your claim is likely to be. What's it going to generate for the attorney? Sad to say, but that's really the way it goes. And access to justice is an expensive thing. It's everyone has access if you can afford it. And I'm wondering, gentlemen, what do you think? What impact is AI likely to have on this? Satish, you want
Yeah, let me
to
jump
start
in.
off?
And then
Mhm.
I know Damien has some slides that are probably going to be very, very helpful here. Number one is I think there are two barriers that the average person, the average client faces when they're seeking legal help, apart from the cost. One is that, the business of law is one that discourages people from easily obtaining help. There are all these barriers. There are rules like the unauthorized practice of law. Then there are like structural issues like the cost of law school and legal education that make it really hard for the average person to get access to justice. But then the second reason is much simpler. It's just that the process and the intake and consultations and paperwork are all huge barriers. They take up a lot of time, they're inefficient, and give lawyers this reputation of being inaccessible. It's just hard to communicate with someone who's in court, who's juggling, a million cases. And AI can help resolve both of those issues. One, AI can make legal principles, legal information, legal advice much more accessible to people directly. You don't need a middleman. You don't need a gatekeeper anymore. And I think that's a real challenge for the kind of historical or structural law industry and court industry and law school industry to grapple with. That we don't need these middlemen anymore. We don't need these gatekeepers. But then practically, there's all of these ways that technology can help people fill out forms, do intakes, be referred to lawyers, get information on how they can act on their own before they're sued in court. So in broad categories, I think there's two ways that we're going to see this revolution impact clients in the law. Damien?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And, I worked as a litigator for about 15 years. And when I was an associate working for a big law firm, there was a joke amongst us associates, which wasn't a joke, saying that we associates couldn't afford to hire ourselves. That is, our billable hour rates were too high for us to hire ourselves. And we were making $175,000. So if we were too expensive for $175,000, what hope does the average person that maybe makes less than that? And so I think that for access to justice, it used to be, as Robert aptly mentioned, the best law that money can buy. That is, if you can afford it, you can be able to do it. But what hope does somebody named Jane have? She has a valid claim of discrimination, but she makes only $21,000. So this means that she makes too much to get legal aid. She doesn't reach the threshold, but far too little to hire any lawyer on this call. So really, when we think about this, this is, somebody making 18,000, even somebody making 50,000 or 75,000, maybe around $100,000, you might start being able to hire somebody. But maybe average lawyer makes about 150. Maybe around then you can start hiring lawyers. So what do we do with all the people in red? That is, makes too much to get legal aid, but far too little to hire a lawyer. That's about 50 to 6% of the population. So do we say to them, "Oh, you're out of luck, tough. You don't get access to the law"? And by the way, access to the law means access to democracy. And if somebody feels like they're locked out of the legal system, they feel like the democracy is not working for them. And there comes revolution. So that's 92% of legal needs are unmet because we lawyers are too expensive. And then you go say, how much is the amount in dispute? If the amount in dispute is less than $100,000, no lawyer is going to take that because it's not worth their time, and no client's going to sue over it. Not until you reach about 150,000 does this actually make sense. So this is a huge gap that maybe AI can be able to help. And so, what do we when we think about legal help for access to justice? It's a spectrum. It's not binary. Option one is we do nothing to do this gap, and we've been doing this quite well for the last 40 years. Better than nothing is plain old Googling. Somebody in Pennsylvania does a search and happens to get California law or New York law and thinks that that's gospel, right? That sucks. But it's better than nothing. Better than that is maybe ChatGPT, where you could be able to put in your facts and could be able to analyze that. It's going to be better than Googling, but as everybody knows, it might hallucinate, or it might, if you're in Pennsylvania, cite New York law or California law as if it's gospel in Pennsylvania. Better than that is maybe if you have a large language model plus yesterday's case, yesterday's statute, yesterday's regulation, where they can then reason with, and be able to say, hey, you live in Pennsylvania, so here are Pennsylvania's laws. That's better than bare LLMs. Better than that is a good human, that like a justice worker that has been working in this space, maybe not a lawyer, but a justice worker, to be able to work with the large language model plus the law to be able to help poor people in a way that they're not being helped today. Maybe better than that is a bad lawyer or an okay lawyer or the best lawyer in the world. I can't afford the best lawyer in the world, nor can anybody else. So really the question is, what does Jane get? Do we give her something around here, or do we say, no, you're stuck with plain old Googling, we're going to pat you on the head and say it's for your own good. We don't want to do harm to you. And so this is something that we're building in Minnesota with the AI sandbox, saying that maybe if you're using the law plus large language models to prevent hallucinations, or maybe justice workers plus the law, maybe you could be able to do better than just plain old Googling or bare LLMs. And again, that 92% is something that we need to be able to protect.
Wow, interesting. I knew only anecdotally how much what the goal looked like, but the 50 to 60% figure is really pretty alarming, that over half the country really can't afford its own legal system. Um, so I mean, as you were speaking, a couple thoughts came to my mind. It's one thing to be able to Google something or even inquire of ChatGPT and come back with an answer, but you're still left without what I would call efficacy here, right? You may know that you have a claim. You may be all the more angry or fired up about the fact that you have a claim, but actually doing something about it, filing a complaint, getting access to courts. People don't, even with the advent of these AI tools, they really don't possess sort of the big picture or the skills necessary to effectively represent themselves. Is that just something that we need to slide to the right of your chart even further, Damien, to be able to address that? And I guess I'm saying, on the one hand, there's knowledge, which is helpful. It's I didn't have that before, but beyond that, I really need agency. I really need the ability to do something with my knowledge, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. We need to move people more to the right. And as we do that, you can imagine that the lawyers on this call might be able to decrease their cost because they use AI to be able to give a more affordable service to them. So those lawyers will then be able to say, rather than being able to, take only $125,000 or higher in dispute, maybe I can start taking cases that are 75,000 or 50,000 and use large language models to still make those profitable. So now the consumer who doesn't want to represent themselves could be able to go to an actual lawyer that knows how to go to court and do things, and that lawyer can serve them more effectively and more cost effectively. I think that's probably the way that we can push Jane to the right.
Uh-huh.
And there's another way to think about this, which is that we have a broken system right now where we don't help people until they're in crisis, in a legal crisis. Instead, we can use AI to give people guidance when they're facing life problems, not legal problems. Like if your heat's out, is that a legal problem? I think the average person would say, nah, it's a life problem. It's just something I got to deal with. Or if your boss is mistreating you at work, or you get fired, wrongfully, or you have a domestic violence issue or a child custody issue, these are life problems. And for most people, they're just looking for answers on how to deal with these life problems. Recently, I heard legal futurist Richard Susskind say, we should be building fences at the top of the cliff, not providing ambulances at the bottom of the cliff, right? And all we have in the legal world is ambulances at the bottom of the cliff, legal services and crisis managers, right? We don't have anything at the top of the cliff that says, hey, watch out. This is what you can do to avoid falling off that cliff. And AI is the most powerful thing I've ever seen in my 20 years of practicing as a legal services lawyer to provide that kind of information, what I call actionable legal information to people when and where they need it in a manner that they can digest it in their own native language, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So it's a huge opportunity for us to change the way we think about delivering services to clients of all kinds.
So
And to that
Satish,
preventive law point too, there's a lot that we can do to be able to help people before they need help. And I love, Satish, every time you say that these are just human problems. These are problems that humans have. And to give a personal anecdote, a way that you could imagine this being in the hands of consumer. There was my neighbor who's right over there just let us know last week that she's thinking about putting up a fence, which might be about 1 or 2 feet from my library window. And I was quite upset about this. Right, this is something that might block light to be able to and will make essentially my view from my library much worse. So you can imagine that if I weren't a lawyer, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm about to show you on your screen right here, is to be able to say, my neighbor, can they erect a wooden fence between a property lane where it would be only about 1 or 2 feet from my neighbor's window and would block the natural light. I, as a consumer, don't think of that as a legal problem. That's just a problem I have, right? But it is truly a legal problem. So if it could be able to say, here are actual non-hallucinated Minnesota cases and non-hallucinated Minnesota statutes and regulations and secondary materials from reputable things. And now if it gives me a legal analysis to be able to give me a lay of the land, now I can go into that conversation with my neighbor in a much better way. Is this a legal problem? Kind of. Is this just a human problem? Probably, right? And so this really gives me a lay of the land to understand the legal metes and bounds, the analysis to be able to then have a better conversation with my neighbor. And now I'm happy to say that our neighbor and I have worked something out now that we know what the law says to be able to better understand what we're going to do as a human level. So this is a way to avoid disputes, not to create more.
Fascinating. So, okay. So, do you envision then that transitioning from a client on the one hand using these tools, or a prospective client using these tools as a form of self-help, um, do you think it has a similar positive effect on the ability of the lawyer to actually serve the client? Um, I mean, are there efficiencies? Are there qualitative improvements in what the attorney is able to provide to their clients?
Yeah, this is something that I made up called the 80/20 inversion. And people have asked me, where's the data? And I think it's just anecdotal, but the 80/20 inversion is that right now, lawyers spend 80% of their time on the how of legal work. Like, how do I find the case that I'm looking for? How do I find the statute? How do I intake a client? How do I respond to the million emails that I get? How do I schedule all of my court appearances? How do I resolve a discovery dispute? How do I hire a paralegal? How do I, get office space? How do I get my printer to work? All of these things take up, most of our time, if we're honest. And 20% of the time is spent actually doing the what, meaning the lawyering, the negotiating, the trial work, being on our feet in a live courtroom, those kinds of things. And let's be honest, those are the fun things. Those are the things we want to do more of. So one way that like giving people legal help directly and help lawyers is it allows us to do the work that we want to do anyway, the more complicated cases, the actual legal work, the actual negotiating and trials and witness prep and cross examinations and appeals that we don't have the time to do. So it can be a double benefit. It can give people help before they're in legal crisis, solving their life problems, but then it can also free up lawyers to do the work that's more fulfilling. What's the burnout rate in the legal profession? What's the rate of substance abuse and suicide and depression and divorce? It's huge. It's high. I think we're second to dentists, all those categories. For some reason I can't explain. So why is that? Because we don't
We
do
both inflict
fulfilling
pain.
work. Right, right. So why is that? And I think AI gives us some options towards doing the work that we actually want to do, that's fulfilling, that's rewarding, that's motivating, interesting work. And that's the 80/20 inversion. It flips that. Now we can do 80% of the work that we want to do and leave AI to do all the rest of it. And that takes up 20% of our time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that there's, we as humans have evolutionarily really predisposed to scarcity mindsets. Are we going to have enough food over the next few years, right? As I'm hunting and gathering. So really, as we think, most lawyers think about AI as scarcity, that AI is kind of like a tsunami that we can run in front of for a little while, but eventually it's just going to crash over everybody, right? So that's a scarcity mindset. But maybe we should think about abundance. And abundance relates to characteristic that you know the concept, even though you might not know the name Parkinson's law. That is, if you give yourself a month to do something, it'll take a month. But the horseman's corollary is if you shrink it down to 2 weeks, it'll take only 2 weeks. So the amount of work expands or contracts depending on the amount of time allotted. And maybe it's the same with legal work. This is my friend Darth. He's in-house counsel at Ford Motor Company. He said, do you realize how much work that I have, legal work, that I'm not giving you lawyers because you're far too expensive? He said, number one, I have plenty of work. And number two, if you don't use a large language model, you're fired. And now that you're using a large language model to shrink your unit cost, I'm going to give you way more work because now it's less expensive for me to do, and I can give you all the work I wasn't giving you in the past. This is Jevons paradox. We thought that large language models, we thought that LED light bulbs were going to save us a lot of energy, but they're so cheap, we just leave them on all the time. That is, LED light bulbs are too cheap to measure. So what if legal work were too cheap to measure? What if every time I called, my lawyer, And I say, gosh, every time I call my lawyer, it's $1,000. Forget it. I'm just going to risk it, right? I'm not going to call my lawyer, right? What if that $1,000 shrinks to $100? I'm going to call that lawyer every day. And in the aggregate, maybe I'll spend 1,500 or 2,000 or actually more money in the aggregate. That's Jevons paradox. You shrink it to $100 and I'm going to call you all the time. As society, as the cost shrinks, society uses more of that resource. In the 1980s, we had amazing AI. You know what that was? That amazing AI from the 1980s was? It's called the spreadsheet. And you know what this amazing AI freaked out? All of the accountants that said, my God, it took us a week to do these ledgers. And now the AI does this in seconds. This is going to take all of our jobs. But what happened was when the clients realized it's not going to take a week to do something, but a day, they say, hey, accountants, run scenario 2, and scenario 5, and scenario 20, and scenario 100. And today we now have more accountants than we ever have, not in spite of the spreadsheet, but because of the spreadsheet. Because of Jevons paradox has shrunk the unit cost to be able to let accountants do more high-level things, like think about scenario planning and tax planning. So this is maybe abundance. I think we, as lawyers, worry that AI is going to take our jobs, but as we shrink our unit costs, that's 92% of legal needs are unmet because we lawyers are too expensive. That 92%, accountants would call that a latent market that is just waiting to be exploited. And maybe AI could be able to serve that 92% much more cost effectively.
Damien, in that regard, and I don't want to delve too far into it because it really goes to the question of the legal business model in contrast to the question of client representation here. But do you think that lawyers' practice of valuing themselves based on the amount of time they're spending on something is therefore affected by the time savings or the time elimination that AI represents?
100%. There's a joke that the slowest lawyer wins the race. Because if you spend 10 hours doing something that I spend 1 hour on, you make more money than I do, right? So lawyers hate efficiency, but that's actually not true. Hourly lawyers hate efficiency, but you know who doesn't hate efficiency is contingency fee lawyers, flat fee lawyers, subscription fee, success fee. All of them, they shrink their time, they make more money. Also, you know who else? Corporate law departments, in-house counsel, they love efficiency. You know else? Government workers, attorneys general, prosecutors, public defenders, all of them have, all of these people have more work than there is time. So it's only the hourly folks that hate efficiency. Everybody else loves efficiency. And if you show me the incentive, I'll show you the Anka. You want to incentivize hours? I'll give you more hours. You want to incentivize efficiency and productivity? I'll give you more efficiency and productivity. So when we think about the hourly billing model, all lawyers often think about is how much money we brought in the door, how much we brought in last quarter, last year, et cetera. But we don't often think as much about the cost of doing that. What's our overhead to be able to serve those? But if you go over to the flat fee side, you realize if you shrink the cost, that is, if you can not spend 10 hours on the thing, but 10 minutes on a thing, you actually make more money. You make more profit. And you can make more, so much more profit. You can say to the client, hey, I'll drop my rates below what I've said at the hourly level. And the client says, wait. Not only do I pay less, but I get the certainty of a flat fee. Sign me up. And if the client doesn't know what that top line is, you can actually push it up even higher and actually make more profit. So this is the ability, if you move from the hourly side to the flat fee side, you can make way more money using AI as a cost shrinker to be able to make more money. I did plaintiff side antitrust work where I would sue over price fixing cabals. And what would happen with those price fixing cabals is that one jerk would drop their prices. And what would happen next is that they would steal all the customers from their competition. And what would happen then is that everybody would have to drop their price, right? This is how price fixing cabals go away. We as lawyers don't have price fixing cabals, but we do have hourly billing cabals. And once lawyers figure out, and I've talked to a lot of lawyers that say, I'm making more money than I ever have under flat fees, because now I've shrunk my cost to make more money. And what happens then is they're stealing the work from all of their competitors, all of their competitor law firms. And what happens next is obvious, right? Everybody's going to have to jump in line. So the real question is, do you want to be law firm number 1 that's done this and stealing all of your competitors' lunch? Or do you want to be law firm number 20 that doesn't know why the phone stopped ringing? That says, you know, you can blame the market, you can blame the client's sweetheart deal, but the clients don't want to tell you why they stopped calling you. Maybe they just stopped calling you because they want to go with somebody who's doing work in a faster, better, stronger way, and they don't want to tell you why. You're a Luddite. I'm not going to call you anymore.
And to that, I can add the experience in New York City that I have in the nonprofit side. In New York City, we spend $1 billion, what Clio spent to acquire VLEX every year on legal services and housing support and rent payments. 1 billion every single year. And we're still not helping at least half the people. So there's a problem there in the model, right? We're not valuing the problem correctly, and we're not valuing the solution correctly. And so if we think about the problem in terms of outcomes, in terms of solutions, in terms of upstream solutions, in terms of using technology towards those upstream solutions, we could probably spend that money a lot better. Instead, we're trapped in saying, oh, there isn't enough money, there aren't enough lawyers, there isn't enough time. This is the best we can do. And that goes back to the scarcity mindset that Damien described earlier. Like we're trapped in that mindset.
Very nice, gentlemen. I mean, we've worked through what sounds like a very rosy future for both attorneys and clients here. Clients are going to get more powerful tools that they can own and use, and perhaps collaborate with attorneys to bring about the ends that they're wanting, perhaps even at lower prices than they're used to paying. Let's flip it. Let's look now, if those are the promises offered by AI, what are some of the perils here? And I want to look first at a question of transparency. And I know that this is a theme that's been running through a lot of conversations about AI and the legal profession. Is it incumbent on me as an attorney, and does it improve my relationship with my client if I'm disclosing my use of AI in bringing about a resolution for the client? Is it even possible? Will it, as we move down the road, will it even be possible to partition out what part of this was, Robert Cost Esquire, and what part of this was um, my OpenAI connection
I
or
think
Google?
those questions are distractions. I don't think it matters. Just like it didn't matter 20 years ago if you were using Lexis or Westlaw versus going to the law library in your law firm or law school. It doesn't matter if you use Google to find an answer or you go hunt it down on the street like a beat reporter in the 1950s. It similarly doesn't matter how you get to the answer that you're seeking because you already have an ethical obligation to make sure that you're telling the truth, that your citations are accurate, that you're candid with the court, that you're going to zealously represent your client. The only area where there are some troubles is if you're going to continue to bill clients at the same hourly rate, but you're using AI to do the work in 1/10 the time. Well, that's dishonest, but that's already unethical. You don't need new rules and new laws. And my prediction is, we're in this bubble right now where everything is something AI because it's a marketing thing, right? Everyone wants the VC money and AI companies are hot. And you can look up Nikki Shaver's chart and see that there's like 500 AI companies right now, and 3 more just launched since we started this, webinar. Um, I think in the next 6 months or so, you're going to stop hearing AI, especially in legal tech, because it's going to be a negative. You're just going to hear this is our process. It's baked in. It doesn't matter to you. You don't care if we use Lexis versus VLEX versus Westlaw. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant to the question of the product that comes out because that product is already governed by existing ethical rules.
I agree 100% with that. And, there's, I disclose right now? Yes, I did. In fact, I'm sorry, client, I did in fact use spell check, and I did in fact use grammar check. And I did actually use Westlaw to be able to make me smarter, right? I did in fact use VLEX to do this, right? Of course not. We as lawyers don't really have to disclose the tools that we're doing as long as what we're doing is competent and we're using the best tools for that job. And large language models are the air we breathe. There's a real question, when people say, does it have AI in it? That question itself seems as stupid as to be able to ask in the 1980s, well, does it have electricity in it? Does this typewriter have electricity in it? Yeah, but everything has electricity in it, right? That's not the point. Everything in large language models are going to be helping everything in the law because everything in the law is based on words. We ingest words, we analyze words, and we output words. And it turns out large language models do all three of those things at superhuman speed and a postgraduate level. So, of course, AI has the law in it. The law is using AI. Of course, it is. It's the air that we breathe. And so, do we need to disclose that? That seems that is a distraction, as Satish says. Number two, if we think about other dangers that people are thinking about, hallucinations and that kind of thing. And if you want to say, well, we should really take these things down because it's going to harm so many people, I say how. Because how are we going to take down OpenAI? How are we going to take Google? How are we going to take down Microsoft? And this goes to the difference between what is legal information and what is legal advice. Legal information is the cases, the statutes, the regulations, and also the treatises, and also the law firm websites that talk about here's the information that don't create a attorney-client relationship. That is legal advice. And historically, the kind of blurred line between these two is that legal advice is if you apply a particular client's facts to the law, then that is legal advice. But this line in the middle is totally obliterated because it turns out that large language models can apply the client's facts to the law quite well. Thank you very much. And so the question is a treatise legal advice? And the answer is no. Of course, a treatise is a legal information, even though it has particular facts that your client might have in those treatises, right? So you have a very comprehensive treatise that might give the client the facts. Is this the unauthorized practice of law? What are the elements of breach of contract? Of course not. This is legal information. Everyone should have free access to this, rich or poor. Is this the unauthorized practice of law? Is this legal advice? Well, no, I mean, this is getting closer. To show breach of contract, you have to show there's a contract, breach, damages, etc. But look at this disclaimer. Who would think this is legal advice? And look, is Richard Poo actually creating an attorney-client relationship? Is he giving legal advice to every viewer here? And the answer is no. This is legal information, not legal advice. You can't take it down because everyone should have access to this. Now, if you go to Google, you could be able to ask about guns and cannabis. I'm going to click on this, and now here's a really nice draft a letter to the landlord. So here's now a deep research question where I've asked about the laws regarding cannabis in Minnesota, and it gave me a full analysis of cannabis law in Minnesota. It also gave me, then I followed up by saying, here are my client's particular facts, or maybe my particular facts at the bottom of this. And by the way, look at all of these cases, statutes, and regulations being noted here. Then I said, oh, and by the way, disclaimer, you can see here, this report, general overview, laws are subject to change. Specific legal advice should be sought from a qualified attorney. So what reasonable consumer would think that this is legal advice? Then I followed up by saying, okay, here, by the way, all of these non-hallucinated things, now analyze this fact pattern. Carlos Reyes, a natural US citizen, created this thing. So here's my fact pattern. Here are my facts. And AI is quite happy to be able to give, provide, applying the facts to the law. And here's the analysis of that. And then I said, now draft a letter to the landlord saying why I didn't violate the laws. Now here's something that a lawyer could well have done. So the question is, does Google care one whit about the unauthorized practice of law statutes? And are all of these source materials here, are they committing the unauthorized practice of law and giving legal advice here? And then what Google Gemini did was took these lawyer websites and turned them into a summary. So does it flip from legal information when the lawyer does it to legal advice when Google does it or an LLM does it? Because they've simply summarized what is out here. Is it like a quantum particle that flips from legal information to legal advice? No, right? Does ChatGPT flip it into legal advice? Does Perplexity? So the real question is, all of these are real questions, and all it's like doing is taking a 1,000-page treatise and giving you the 2 or 3 pages that apply to you. It does not actually be able to take legal information and turn it into advice. This is legal information all the way down. But the question is, does Google care about this and about the unauthorized practice of law statute? And the answer is no. Google doesn't care one whit about this. And so the last thing I'll say before I'll hand it over is that what if the systems actually turn legal advice into legal information? So you can imagine that from legal information, is marijuana legal in my state? That is legal information, right? This is in statutes. They say marijuana is legal in these instances, but marijuana is illegal in these instances, right? This is legal information in the statutes, cases, et cetera. can I possess marijuana? Is a little trickier, right? Because now I'm taking my facts and putting them into the law. Now, can I tell somebody else whether she can present marijuana, right? That's a little harder. Now, should I possess marijuana? Okay, now we're pretty clearly getting into advice, whether I should or should not do something. But what if AI tools could take 2, 3, and 4 and turn them into one and say, I'm not going to answer 2, 3, or 4, but I will tell you, number 1, legal information. I can tell you whether it's legal in your state. Here are the cases. Here are the statutes. Here are the regulations. And turns out large language models are quite capable and easy to turn 2, 3, and 4 to number 1 into legal information. It's also quite easy to tell the AI to be empathetic, to be able to say, I'm sorry this is happening to you. If this were happening to me, I would consider this. This is the same as your doctor to say, I'm not going to give you advice as to whether you should take this cancer treatment, but if it were me, this is what I would do, right? That's not medical advice. That's just what I would do, right? And in the same way, when I was a litigator, I would often say, I'm not going to give you legal advice, but if this were me, this is what I would do. And that made me think, how much of the quote unquote legal advice that I gave as a lawyer was truly just legal information and just legal empathy, where I didn't want to give legal advice because if they took my advice, they could sue me for malpractice. So lawyers are disincentivized from giving quote unquote advice. And how much of what you give as a lawyer every day is truly just legal information? And what if you just give statistics? In situations like yours, 80% have this result. That's information, dude. That's not advice. 75% are dismissed. I'm not telling you what to do. These are just information. This is not advice. So if we bring all of these over, and maybe the do-gooders can be able to give a lot of good information to people who need them, because the scofflaws don't care. We should give these tools to the do-gooders.
So, Damien, it raises the question, at what point then does it become the practice of law? Do I have to go, let's say, extremely normative in my interaction with my client in order for it to be the practice of law? In other words, you should do this unequivocally. You must do this, Damien. Or I am going to do this on your behalf unless you tell me not to. So the position I'm taking here isn't, well, 75% of these cases fail. I'm just saying.
Sure. Well,
If I turn it from that
lawyers,
to a
the
declaration.
clients always have agency, right? I, as a lawyer, have never mandated that my client do anything, right? The choice is always there. If you think back to antiquity, that humans have free will, right? The clients have free will. They can do whatever they like. I'm just giving you essentially the metes and bounds of the law for you to make a more informed decision. And so, really, what we as lawyers sell is less advice, mostly, and more trust. That is, the clients can now trust me to have now described the scenario in a way that they can make a more informed decision for themselves. I'm not mandating them, but I'm giving them the metes and bounds of what the law says and giving them maybe statistics about 75% go this way, 25% go that way, so that they can make a more informed decision. So I don't think we need to mandate to make it advice. But really, does it really need to be advice for me to be able to be helpful to my clients? Maybe they're not selling the widgets that I've been giving. I'm not selling the complaints, the answers, the motions, the briefs, the memo, right? Maybe I'm not selling those pieces of paper, but really what I'm selling is trust. That is, does the client trust me enough to say, gosh, I've been in a bunch of these things and you don't want to go there, trust me, right? This trust is not going to be in the tools I'm building. It's not going to be in the tools that Satish is building. But humans usually want humans to look them in the eye and say, your problem is now my problem. I'm going to help you through this. So I don't think we need to mandate outcomes. I think we just need to show that we're giving them trust.
Satish, any thoughts there?
Yeah, and building on that trust aspect, I think this is why courts and governments and legal services organizations who already have that trust should be building these tools and putting them up on their websites, because clients are going to trust those sources. And if we don't enter that space, they're going to go to Google and Reddit and Facebook and get bad advice, bad information. And there's nothing to stop those entities from doing that. So we have an imperative to enter this space, build on that trust we already have, and give people the information that they need. And the other point I would make is that I'm willing to push the envelope and push this line between legal information and legal advice. And I built a tool called Roxanne in New York City. And one of the things we noticed is no one challenged our giving legal advice to people to a bot. Why do you think nobody challenged it? Because there's no market for that service, right? And so if we can push the line in areas in which there's no business model, there's no business model in small claims court. There's no business model to help tenants get repairs made, right? Push the line, the boundaries in those areas, and then fall back on it when we're challenged in other areas like family law, like bankruptcy, like consumer debt, like personal injury. Maybe there are huge interests that are going to fight back. Usually lawyers who are going to say you're hurting my business model. First, we try it in areas in which there's no business model, and we can say, hey, look, there's no consumer harm. There's no terrible things that happen to people. Most people got exactly what they're looking for, and they solved the problem that they were trying to solve. And let's move it forward to other topics in the law.
I agree 100% with that. And yeah, so 2 points on that. Number one, it was a really good point that Satish made, is that if it's a court portal, courts by definition are not providing legal advice, right? So if they do it, if a court does it, it's not UPL, the unauthorized practice of law. So that's number one, is that I agree that more of the courts need to provide legal information, which maybe is applying the facts to the law in a way that maybe is a way that is helpful to the clients, that the courts have been maybe reticent to do in the past. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is also Satish's really good point, is that, listen, we're not taking away any lawyer's income here. That is, there is no market for this anyway. And I see this really as an ethical imperative. We as lawyers are officers of the court, and our duty is first and foremost to the public, and to be able to say that we are doing justice. And if we are saying, if we're locking out 50 to 60% of the populace because we want to make more money, shame on us. This is an ethical, really a breach, to be able to say, screw the poor people because I want to make more money. That is not why we became lawyers. But I find that this is a way that a lot of lawyers are coming at this. And when I was in a meeting with a Supreme Court of a big state, and one of the lawyers in town said, we probably shouldn't do all of the areas of law because the bar is going to get really upset with us eating their lunch. And I said, hey, you just said the quiet part out loud. That is, the unauthorized practice of law statute was not ostensibly to protect lawyers' incomes. It's ostensibly to be able to protect the public, to protect, the poor unwashed masses from those evil non-lawyers that are seeking to do them harm. But really, if you look at the statutes, and there's a really good Stanford law professor article that is published in the Yale Law Journal that talks about the origins of the unauthorized practice of law statutes, and it really was never to protect the public. Because what happened in the early 1900s is that in the early 1900s, you could have the American Automobile Association, the AAA. They would actually represent you if you got in a car accident. Banks would actually represent their members in contract negotiations as legal advice. So there was all sorts of ways that non-lawyers would provide legal advice. But then the 1930s came and the Great Depression came, and all the lawyers were like, oh, all of our income has gone away. And only then did the unauthorized practice of law statutes come in. And this law review article actually shows all the documents that talks about the lawyers, and it has the lawyers' documents saying, hey, we need to be able to circle the wagons to be able to protect our income. So it was never about protecting the public. It was always about protecting our incomes. And if we say the quiet part out loud, that, listen, we shouldn't do the unauthorized practice of law because we need to protect our lawyers' incomes. If we say that out loud, shame on us. Poor people need help. 92% of legal needs should be helped. And if we just try to protect our incomes, shame on us.
Wow. This is a nice this topic in particular, I think could get ever deeper and deeper. It does, in my mind, raise the question: what ultimately is the lawyer good for here? Right, and trust is a key word. I think judgment is an interesting kind of word in this context as well. We're not merely here as purveyors of legal information, and if we are, we're going to be superseded very quickly. I think we're here in part because people trust our exercise of judgment, and I don't trust ChatGPT's exercise of judgment. I don't think it's judging anything. Let me make a slight transition here again to another. I'm
Can I,
sorry.
can
Go
I
ahead,
comment on
David.
that one thing?
Yeah.
Yes, when you think about what that judgment comes from, that judgment, some of that comes from the cases, the statutes, and the regulations, right? The law, but a lot of that judgment comes from stuff in your head. That is my data set. I have 1 billion legal documents. That is all the cases, all the statutes, all the regulations, all the motions, all the briefs, all the pleadings, right? So I have a lot of those. But your judgment is often what happens in a closed door meeting. That is in the negotiations that happened. The time that I got called back by the judge into chambers and I got dressed down for this, right? That's not in my data set. That's not in this, right? But that's in your brain. And so what clients are going to you for is not just the cases, the statutes, and the regs, the law, but they're also going for those closed door negotiations to say, gosh, I tried to settle this case before, but it failed. And if we go this way, it's going to sad. And this judge is going to hate it because I got cut, right? All that stuff in your head is why they hire you. So I would say, just like TurboTax, I use TurboTax, used it for the last 25 years, and I also go to an accountant because I want to be able to say, gosh, when the audits happen in those closed door meetings, how close is too close, right? So that's why I hire the accountant, not for the TurboTax to crap out the widget, right? But the expertise, the trust of those closed door meetings. So I think that's what they're buying, is that trust that is locked in lawyers' brains.
But also, we overvalue our worth as lawyers. There's no profession that thinks more highly of themselves than lawyers, I would argue. And so let's be honest about our true value and where we add value. Otherwise, we're never going to get to that next place where we're trying to solve the real problems and trying to get back to like the reasons many of us went to law school in the first place. It's not to do the work that we're probably doing, but it's to be, pillars of our democracy, to stand up for the rule of law, to fight for those who don't have a chance, give them an equal chance in the system, and so on. So let's be honest about our real worth and what is our value add, and not overvalue it, which is what we do.
Let me ask a slightly different question. As LLMs, AI comes to predominate really as the tool of the legal profession, do you have concerns about attorney competence? We do tend to become so reliant on our technologies that we lose basic skills. I'm old enough to remember the slide rule, which disappeared when the calculator came along. And there came a point when I think I would be hard pressed to figure out how I calculated a square root by hand. Right. So, is there a similar danger here? That comes from perhaps over reliance is a conclusion, but from a reliance on these tools to quite literally do our thinking for us.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I hear that all the time. There's a saying called that I like, which is don't be an enemy of the future. You cannot stand in the way of progress. I don't know how to churn butter. Is that relevant anymore? It's not, right? And a lot of these things that we do are just not going to be relevant. And we can hold on with our, white knuckles as long as we want to these things, but it's coming for us. And we have to adapt, was it Sam Altman or Dario Amodei said, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who knows how to work with AI. That's what we're looking at. And so I get the arguments, but those arguments have existed. I think Richard Halter in the chat wrote, throughout history, new technology has always created more jobs. It eliminated old school jobs like buggy whips and maybe basket weavers and pin setters and bowling alleys and elevator operators. Like, we don't need that. We have to move beyond these traditional roles that we see for ourselves. It's inevitable.
I agree 100%. And there's the question of how do we train the next set of lawyers? And I think the next set of lawyers are going to do just fine, right? When I was first lawyer in 1999 going to law school, I needed to learn how to shepherdize things. And to shepherdize things in 1999, I would have to go to the books and be able to have to go from this book to that book to that book to make sure I went to the bottom. Is that a necessary skill to be a lawyer? No, it just wasted my time. right? And so not only is maybe these skills that we've had in the past maybe unnecessary, but maybe we could also be able to say that maybe as we go into our large language models future, maybe not using large language model can be the act of malpractice. If you go to a doctor's office, do you want somebody who hasn't updated their work since the 1980s or the 1990s? Or would you rather do somebody that's using the most recent tech? And to Satish's really good point, when have we ever successfully slowed technology? When I was in 1999, there was a real question as to whether we can give legal advice by email because, oh, that's insecure. Because every time you send an email, it goes to HOP and unsecure servers. Email is inherently unsecure, but everybody used it and became A-OK. And then, with e-discovery, no, I need human eyes on every single document. But then the court said, hey, use it. And now it's totally permitted. You'll take, I'm never going to go to the cloud. You're going to take my server out of my cold, dead hands. But then, the COVID happened. Everybody's there. And now it's okay. So we've seen this movie before, ethics, bias, hallucinations, right? Where does this end? Of course, we know where it ends. So the question is, if you're not going to stop it, how soon before, in the old world, if you use books instead of electronic research, there's all sorts of judges that say that you've wasted clients' funds. If you use paper, not e-discovery, again, all sorts of judicial opinions saying you've wasted client funds. That's malpractice. Wait, you missed evidence that a quick Google search would have revealed? You committed malpractice, right? We've seen this movie before. So how long do you say, wait, you spent 10 hours something that the AI can do in 2 minutes? Or you missed things that, use keywords instead of AI vectors? Or you missed evidence that AI would have revealed? Right? How soon is this going to be malpractice if you don't use AI? So not only is it something that we should maybe think about doing, I think we have an ethical imperative to do to avoid malpractice.
Wow, it's coming up roses. Interesting. Hey, it's coming up on the end of the hour. I want to respect everyone's time. Is there someone here in our audience that would like to raise a question through the chat and perhaps have Satish and Damien respond?
Richard Halter has a good point that he loves the line that you'll lose your job to people who know how to work with AI. And I'd say there's 2 tropes. One trope is, AI won't take your job, but people who use AI will. Right. So that's the old trope that I like a little bit less than something else Satish said earlier is that, yes, AI will take your job, but it will take the worst parts of your job, leaving you with only the best parts of your job. And, we as lawyers do a lot of thinking and we do a lot of thunking and we do a lot of drudgery, right? And stuff that we hate doing. AI can do a lot of that thunking for us and just leaving us with the thinking part. And so I think that, AI, won't take your job. People that use AI will, right? I mean, that's kind of a scarcity mindset, but I prefer the thinking over thunking. We want to think more, thunk less, and AI is a way to do that.
Terrific. Satish, any concluding thoughts here, comments, exiting this?
No, none at all. This is really great, really fun. I learned so much.
This has been fabulous, gentlemen. I'm so glad I invited you along here. I can't imagine having come to some of these perspectives on my own here. I thank you very, very much. I hope that everyone in the audience really enjoyed this. There is an AI summary to come of this. I'm happy to share it with a mail list, provided that's okay with you all. And there's a recording here, but I don't know that any of us has time to re-listen to recordings. Satish, Damien, thank you very much. For all those in attendance, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll look forward to perhaps another webinar here in the near future. Take care, all. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Bye.